Hello, everyone. This is Grant Friedman with PSD Tuts, and today I'm with Matt Kloskowski, the education and curriculum developer for the National Association of Photoshop Professionals, otherwise
It's
known
a
as
mouthful.
it is a mouthful, otherwise known as NAP. And he's also the author of this fantastic book here. Let me hold it up so everybody can see it. It's called Photoshop Compositing Secrets. And it's a great book filled with lots of cool tips and tutorials for combining images in Photoshop. And I guess my
Hey, I owe you 20 bucks. Sorry, I'll send it to you later.
that's okay. My endorsements are free. And I guess to start things off, you know, maybe you can take a minute and tell our readers a little bit about what compositing is, and why would someone ever need to combine several photos?
So you hear compositing and collaging almost kind of, you hear those terms used kind of together. So to me, to compositing is it's taking somebody from one photo and it's putting them into a different environment. And I think it's become really popular lately. I think for a lot of reasons. I think photography and Photoshop have gotten more accessible to people, that they're able to do compositing where 10 years ago it was, you had to be the best of the best to even know how to do something like that. So I think everything's gotten better and easier for people to be able to do it. And I think the landscape of design and photography have changed such that sometimes it's hard to get the person and the photographer into the place where you need them, into the conditions where you need them to pull off the image that whoever the end client is, whether it's for you or for a client, to pull off that image. Sometimes you just you get out there, and what happens if it's a sunny day and the image calls for clouds? I mean, what do? You have to take what you get. So I think compositing is kind of that process of taking a person from one photo, putting them into a different environment that you couldn't, for many reasons, maybe it was budget, maybe it was too dangerous, whatever it was, be able to actually photograph yourself.
Now, you spend a lot of time in your book, which I think is really cool, and it's something that most tutorials that I've seen, they don't really cover, which is how to actually shoot the image too. And I know you're an accomplished photographer. Photography is something that you're very interested in. But I know that a lot of our readers aren't. And so what's in this book for somebody who's not an accomplished photographer,
Yeah.
or even someone who may just barely know how to use their camera?
Yeah. No, absolutely. So, what I would do is recommend, and whether or not they bought the book or not, what I would do is recommend that if you're a designer, if you're a Photoshop artist, then stick with what you know. The book by any means was not written so that somebody would do all. Basically, when I sat down to write the book, I kind of had to figure who the audience was and who's going to buy this book. And no matter what I did, no matter what I put as a tagline on the book, I knew that there would be photographers who would buy the book and want to know how these photos were shot. And I knew that there would be designers and retouchers that bought the book that wanted to know the compositing portion of it, that had no desire to even do the photography portion of it. Somebody's typically giving them the images that they're going to work with. So the way I broke it out as far as the book goes is I just kind of put it in different sections. There's a section for each tutorial, each composite, there's the setup, and then there's a composite. Now, beyond the book, my recommendation for what you were talking about is what do I recommend to people out there that aren't photographers, that maybe don't want to be photographers or don't have the equipment to do that. Do what you're good at. If you're really good at Photoshop and you're really good at combining those things, and the art of making a composite or collage is where your passion is, then just do that part. Get really good at that part, because there's a big place in the market for that portion of it. In my experience, most of the really good composites you see out there are multiple people working together. It's a designer that's working together with the photographer, that's working together with an art director to try to get that final image. And I think that's a great place to be. So you don't have to be the photographer that soup to nuts, they're doing the whole image from start to finish. By all means, you can get a lot from compositing by just getting really good at placing someone from one scene into another. And I think in the end, I think if I can offer any advice, it's try to work with the photographer. If you're not going to be the photographer, at least try to work with the photographer. You know, you do one job and you realize, you know, crap, if he just hadn't put a light on the right hand side, I'd be able to pull off this composite easily. But now I've got to jump through hoops because there's a light source where there's no, you know, things like that will happen. So if I have any advice, it's at least learn how to work with the photographer. You know, if you have an idea that here's an image and the background that I have has a light source coming from one side, tell the photographer that. Say, hey, you know, this is the idea. This is what the client wants. When you set this up, put a light source over there because it makes my job a lot easier later on.
How important do you think it is for just an average designer to learn like basic photography techniques and learn how to, you know, set up lighting and how lighting affects objects in a scene and that sort of thing?
You know, I think for an average designer, you know, people may disagree with me on this. I think if you're a designer and you're at that point, you kind of understand light sources. You understand if a light source is here on my left, it's going to produce a shadow over onto the other side. And if you don't understand that, then I would say, yeah, you know, start to experiment with that stuff. You can do it with a flashlight. You don't need studio gear to do it. But beyond that, I don't think it's that important personally. If you're a designer, if you're a retoucher, if you're someone that wants to be good at that side of things, then I'd say as long as you understand that if I put a light over here, it's going to cast a shadow over there. As long as you understand that, I think you know enough about photography to be able to talk to the photographer and say, okay, this is what I need you to do on the shoot so that you make things easier for me on the post-processing side of it.
Do you think that a designer should bring a camera wherever they go?
I think I think so. I think it's a good idea in general. And believe it or not, compositing has gotten me to bring my camera with me more because I've been a photographer for quite a while, and I kind of became a light snob. You know, if I wasn't in a studio or if I wasn't outside with a great subject and great light, then I just put my camera away. You know, if I was visiting a city and I was walking around at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I just put my camera. I didn't even take it out with me. And compositing has kind of changed it for me, which is kind of cool because now I keep a camera with me a lot more because now anything out there is a possibility for me. A brick wall, a texture, an alleyway, a building, a cool, you know, a car drive. I mean, anything out there is a possible background or texture or whatever. So I would say keep a camera with you. Believe it or not, when I go to these, when I do travel and I take my camera out with me, I don't take a DSLR most of the time. I have a point and shoot that I take with me, and for backgrounds and for what I'm doing, that point and shoot camera gets me, you know, everything that I need. Because chances are the background is not the focus of the image. What you're putting in front of it is usually the focus. And a point and shoot, I mean, they're 12, 15 megapixels now, so they're as good as any, you know, any DSLR when it comes to taking backgrounds and textures. I think they work just fine. But yeah, I would definitely take a camera with me because you never know.
How important do you think it is to build up your image library?
I think it's very important, and so I'll say this: you'll get more satisfaction from building up your image library, and then coming up to a project and realizing, hey, I got a great alleyway that would work perfect as a background for that. You'll get a lot of satisfaction from that because you'll know there's something cool about using your own work, right? So I think it's very important to build up your image library. I have a folder called backgrounds, and inside that folder I have clouds, I have parking garage, little subfolders in there called clouds, parking garages, sports fields, lights. I just take pictures of lights, trees, you know, all these different things. So I do have my own background library. The only thing I'll say to that is there is a place beyond that for stock. So don't compromise your project because you have an okay picture of clouds. And when you go on to like iStock Photo or Photolia or whatever it is, and you see this killer picture of clouds, you're like, it's not mine, but if it makes the image better, don't limit yourself, try to shoot as much of it as you can, but don't limit yourself. Sometimes you just don't have a picture of a helicopter. So you have to go somewhere else to get that picture.
Would you advise some experimentation if if you've got, let's say, a rather large image library? Would you advise people to sort of go into their library and say, let's try this background, let's try the brick wall, now let's try the concrete wall? Or
yeah, I do that all the time. Usually, most of the time when I'm working on a composite, a lot of people ask what comes first, the backgrounds or the person. Most of the time, the person comes first, and then I find a background that's suitable for them. That once in a while I'll have a background and I'll know the shoot that I want to do, and I'll know everything that I want to do to put a person into it. But I would say most of the time the person comes first, and now I'm just experimenting with different backgrounds. I'll try a certain brick wall or an alleyway or, a building, whatever it is. But yeah, I would say, a lot of times, and if you can get good, we'll talk about, I'm sure, we'll touch on the selection extracting process. But if you get good at that, dropping a different background in there becomes pretty easy, because you can select a person off of one background and then keep just dropping them on anything. And eventually, the more you do it, something's going to click. Like, you're going to see it and be like, that's the one. And that's what happens a lot for me.
Can you tell us some tips or secrets that you've discovered that our readers should know about before they begin their next composite?
All right, tips, secrets. So I'd say a big one would be the lighting. All right. So understand that if you have a person that was shot outside in broad daylight at a park at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's going to be really, really difficult to put them into a night scene in a city, with a car driving behind them or something like that. It's going to be hard to pull that off. So I think lighting is big, whether you're lighting it or not. Just kind of understand that's a big factor in selling your composite. Is the lighting has to be good. Even in a studio, you'd want to tell your photographer, if you want moody, you tell the photographer, I want moody, because that means that they don't use a gigantic softbox that's really bright and really flattens out the light on people, because that's not moody. And so it's going to be very hard to put them into a moody scene, if that makes sense. So I would say that lighting is a big one. You've got to kind of understand the feel that you're going for, and there has to be a similarity between where the person was shot in and where you're going to put them. I think perspective is a big one. I see a lot of times people will take their point and shoot cameras, point and shoot or a DSLR, whatever it is, and they'll put a wide angle lens on, or they'll go as wide as it can and get close to the person and shoot it. They got head to toe, right? They got the whole thing, but perspective is weird, right? It starts to look distorted. So what I always tell people is, you can't really hurt yourself by stepping back and zooming in if you want to get head to toe, because that kind of compresses everything and makes your perspective a little bit more normal. And so that's going to help a composite later on too. So you don't want things to be extremely wide angle. Couple other ones here. So we got lighting, we got the angle, the whatever lens that you're shooting with. Couple other things. I shoot a lot of poses. Give yourself options. That's a huge one. If you're going to do the shoot, or if you're communicating with the photographer, biggest thing I can say is give yourself options. Shoot it close up, shoot half body, shoot full body, shoot wide angle, shoot everything that you possibly can, because that way you've got a lot of different options of what you can do with that photo.
Tell me about feet. And
it's a great topic.
Yeah.
I'm size 11.
Wow, that's huge. How can you improve a composition by focusing on a subject's feet?
All right, so here I can start this off by giving a compositing tip. A compositing tip that I tell people is avoid the feet if at all possible. If you can do, if you can do waist up in a composite, that's great because you make your compositing life so much easier at that point. If you can avoid the feet, um, so some tips I have for that are darken. All right. I take the burn tool inside of Photoshop and I always darken the area around the feet because if you were to think about this in real life terms, right? Our lights are always going to hit us first and lights always fall off by the time they get down to the feet. So your feet aren't typically as bright as everything else inside of the photo. So I always tell people take the burn tool inside of Photoshop and kind of just brush along the feet, do it on a separate layer, brush along the feet and kind of just darken that area, draw people's attention away from it. And then the other thing is I always tell them put a layer right below when you make you select a person from the background. So they're floating on thin air, right? I always put a layer right below and I take a black brush, really small black brush, kind of soft edge, but not really. And I just paint right outside of their feet because there's always that harsh little shadow that goes right under our feet. And then everything else is a bigger shadow that really there's no formula for. You just have to look at the scene they're in. But that tiny little shadow, that grounds people. That puts people onto the ground, and that's going to be your key shadow for all that. And then again, the dark in that whole feet area really just helps pull people away from it.
What, are there any must-have plugins for Photoshop that you would suggest?
Um, so the one that I use, the one that I use too much anymore, I use Nick Color Effects from Nick Software, Color Effects Pro, and that, you know, could I do all the things that it does inside of Photoshop? I guess I could. It would take me a ton of filters, a ton of layers, a ton of blend modes, and a ton of time to figure it all out. And a lot of times I can't get the same effect. I don't know what they do, but they're crazy. I mean, it's got such a good full featured filter set inside of there. And the new version allows you to like stack filters. You know, if you want a cool vignette and you want that little edgy, contrasty look. So yeah, I use Nick Color Effects Pro 4 now, and I use the tonal contrast, which is one of the filters inside of it. You don't have to buy it; it comes with a whole bunch of them. Tonal contrast is one. Detail extractor is the other one. I use those things religiously, just as a finishing touch. You know what it is? We've gotten accustomed, but from movies, from TV shows, from everything that we see out there. You watch Harry Potter, you watch, you know, all the movies that are out there, X-Men, whatever it is. We've gotten accustomed to a gritty, contrasty look. Okay, and there's no hiding it. It's just we've gotten so accustomed to that a real photo anymore, especially if you're going for that gritty, contrasty look, doesn't cut it. You need to throw something on the top of it, and to me, those filters really help give it that final piece.
What has been your favorite feature in Photoshop CS5?
So my favorite one now is not what I thought my favorite one would be. I thought when CS5 came out, I thought HDR was going to be my favorite feature because they had the HDR Pro and it was better HDR. And so I always thought when it was going to come out, I thought my favorite feature was going to be HDR. And I didn't really play with the selection technology. I think partly because the refine edge button inside of CS5 looks the same as it does in CS4. It's a refine edge button, right? But when you have a selection and you click on refine edge, there's new tools inside of there. And to me, that is probably hands down worth the price of upgrade from a previous version of Photoshop to CS5 because that selection technology in there, I mean, it's amazing. A person with hair, as long as there's somewhat some contrast between them and their background, that person with hair, I mean, you can have them selected out of there in just a matter of 30 or 60 seconds. And it's amazing. Seriously, it amazes me every time that I use it.
Um, what do you think is the best background color for selecting and extracting images?
The best background color, and so I've done tests on this. I've shot people with crazy hair on all different backgrounds. So the best background color that I found is going to be if you can photograph the person in front of white. Okay, if you don't point a light at a white background, then that white background turns to gray. Okay, the only way that white background stays white is if you point a light at it. So if you don't point a light at it, it turns generally to a light gray. So to me, that's the ideal formula. I don't want it black because your color hair, my color hair, if I shoot a person in front of a black background, our hair is going to fade right into that background. And we can use lights and things, but there's going to be issues there. People wear a lot of black, so that becomes a big problem too. White is not bad, except for if you look today, if you look at a lot of the edgy photography, you ever notice that there's always these edge lights around people? Mm-hmm. Just watch a movie, and you're always going to see a light around their face, and it's because there's side lighting and accent lighting back there. That will turn your skin close to white. So if you shoot a person over white, that becomes really hard to select because it's white against white. So that's why gray works really good. Just a light color gray because it just gives you enough definition around everything to be able to make a good selection. And you know what? That's the suggestion. I've pulled people off of just regular backgrounds outdoors. I've pulled people off of some crazy wallpaper background in their house because that's all that there was. And so, the selection technology works really, really well. If you can help it along by giving yourself a good background, you're going to make life a lot easier.
Well, those are all my questions that I have for you. Is there any final words or final thoughts or any tips or anything that you'd like to leave with our readers?
I mean, only maybe to touch on some of the things that you touched on in the beginning, because I think a lot of the audience that probably will see this will fall into that design and retouching category. And my advice would be is don't sweat the photography part of it. Don't feel like I've got to go out there and get a DSLR and buy all this lighting equipment and start shooting that. Make friends with people. If that's not where your passion is, if that's where your passion is, obviously follow it. But if that's not where your passion is, if you love design and you love digital art, stick with that. Get really good at the compositing part of it. Develop friends that are photographers. And when you see a photo online, I mean, heck, I've done this before with friends of mine. I've looked at their portfolios and I've seen a photo that they had, and I've actually sent them an email and said, hey, that would work great for a composite that I want to work on. Would you send me the file that I can use? Of course, if I use it, I'll give you full credit and everything like that. But develop those relationships, and that way, if you're not into the photography portion, that's fine. Just you can be into the design portion. That's the most fun part to me when it comes to compositing, is doing the Photoshop work. That's where you get to be really creative. So I would just say don't sweat that part. Have fun with it, and take your camera with you. Take photos of people and learn what doesn't work and what works and what doesn't work. I shot this person at 2:00 at a park. Doesn't work. I shot him in an alleyway where it was dark and the lighting was flat. That works really good. And I think the more you do it, obviously, like anything, the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it.
Well, everybody, Photoshop Compositing Secrets by
I love that book.
It's a good book by Matt Kloskowski, and it's awesome, and you should check it out if you can find it. And where can everybody get it? Is it in all the bookstores?
It's in all the bookstores. You can get it at any bookstore, any .com, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's on the Apple iBooks. It's on the Kindle. It's on the Kindle on the iPad. It's Barnes and Noble. You name it, you can find it out there just about anywhere.
Awesome. It's everywhere. How much is it?
Probably about $300. You're looking at the back of it. You can probably see before I can.
Yes, it's $49.99 US dollars, and if you're in Canada, it's $51.99.
Yeah, and I think by the time you get it on Amazon, it probably runs around almost half of that. Really, is when you see it online.
So, anyways, guys, great book. Thanks, Matt, for taking the time to talk with
Hey,
me. And
Grant, thank you so much for having me on, and thank you to everyone out there that's watching. I really appreciate it. I'm always a big fan of your website, so I stop there quite often. So it's an honor for me to actually be on the other side of it. So I'm pretty psyched.
we're big fans of what you do over there at Nap, and in Photoshop world and all the stuff that you guys do.
Cool, man. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Take care.